All right, in this tutorial, we're going to create a shield. We're going to create two primary models. There's going to be a very simple low poly version that's going to have UVs, and then there's going to be a high poly version that's going to have lots of detail in it that is not going to have UVs. And so in order to make that, I have some reference. And your first thing you're going to notice is this is not what I would call good reference, in that you could see that I've rotated it, and I'll explain why in a minute, but just the image itself is at, it's kind of the image, the source, is made in perspective, which kind of throws off, whatever we build on the right isn't going to match what's on the left. But we're going to just focus on one area. So I'm going to click here on the plus sign and say maximize viewport. I'm working in Max 2021 here. So I'm going to focus in on this area over here, because as long as I get all my little details out and I make them so that they're centered here in the world, I'm going to get sort of the shape that I want. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go out there and I'm going to start building kind of the overall basic shape of this. So let's come in here and I'm just going to draw a line. Oh, sorry, I meant to say rectangle. I'm going to draw a rectangle. I'm going to kind of click here in the center and drag. I'm just going to go to modify. Here I'm going to go up to move, and then down here at the very bottom at X, Y, and Z, I'm going to put 0 for all those values. Okay. So now I've centered this, so its origin is here at 0. I'm going to convert to an editable spline. I'm going to grab this edge. I'm going to pull it all the way out here. This edge, I'm going to grab and enter X as 0. All right, so this is how far out our edges are going to go for this. So there we go. Kind of defined one side, right? We're going to end up using lathe on it, but let's get some more details built into it first. So I've gone back to create. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. I did Alt-Z to get a zoom. I'm going to zoom in. And so I'm going to go, I'm just going to make a little circle here. And another circle here. Don't worry about making them perfect size. I'm just going to kind of drop some in here. I'm going to throw in another rectangle. And I'm going to throw in another circle. All right. Let's grab this rectangle. And so I only have the one rectangle selected. It's already in edit spline. I'm going to find the geometry rollout. If it's not right here for you, just collapse rollouts until you find it. I'm going to click attach. I'm going to attach these together. All right, I've attached all my objects together, and now I'm just going to start going through, and in spline mode, I'm going to adjust their shape a little bit. So let's lower this down. Let's say this is the outer edge of our shield. So we'll lower our, let's get our little sphere, our circle. Let's zero him out, and then maybe lower him. Well, we'll leave him right there. I think it'll be good. All right, this guy's going to match the edges of this one here. So we'll go, I pressed 1 on my keyboard to switch to vertex. Grab these points, come over. Let's grab this guy. And I'm going to grab all these little circles. Well, no, sorry. I'm going to go into spline, grab the circle, and put 0 for the Z value, so that they're all sitting right there, right on the edge of the plane. There we go. Okay. So now because I'm in the sub-object and they're attached, I can just go into scale and kind of scale them down. And I kind of want to match them to the size of these detail circles out here. Kind of these sort of raised lips that exist. There we go. Okay. Probably before I start doing any kind of Boolean, what I want to do is, one thing to keep in mind is anytime that you're building a high poly to low poly model, you really want to avoid seeing facets, right? So you don't want to have an edge that comes straight, goes straight up, because the rendering process isn't going to be able to catch anything. So I'm going to go into segments here, grab this bottom segment, right click, go into scale, and I'm going to scale him out. And I'm going to go into vertex, select the points up here, these two, right click and convert them into corners. And then under fillet, I'm just going to click on that arrow and drag it. Okay, that's a pretty extreme change. So maybe instead what I'm going to do is where it says 0, I'm going to type in 5 and hit enter. And that's too much, so I'm going to undo that. So I got to click here, negative space, and then I can undo. So maybe I'm just going to type in 1, and that's still way too much. So I'm going to undo. And so I'm going to do like a 0.5. I think that's too much still. I think I'm going to go much more subtle. 0.25, I think that'll be fine. Let's grab this edge and scale that in just a little bit. Alright, grab these verts. Oops. Grab the vertex points, switch to move. I'm going to move those in a little bit, so that they're kind of on the edge there. I think that looks pretty good. Alright, so now we'll go into spline, and we're going to select the main object. I'm going to, under geometry, I'm going to find where Boolean is, make sure I'm on union, click Boolean, and then go through and start attaching, performing the Boolean option to turn these all into one continuous mesh. So now from here, under segment, I'm going to grab these points out, these segments out here. I'm just going to hit delete on my keyboard. I'm going to get the ones here on the bottom. I'm going to come over to the side. I'm going to delete all those. Alright, so now I only got this one set here. I'm just going to vertex, grab this point on the top, kind of lower him down a little bit. And I'm going to grab all of these points out here. I'm holding control when I select them. Right, I'm just grabbing all those points. And I'm going to go into fillet, and I'm just going to do like a really small amount. I'm going to do 0.1 and hit enter. So now they got this slight, really slight, subtle, kind of curved edge. So it's going to look really good. Alright. So now we're going to take our little spline here, go into rotate, and going to do restore view, and let's go and find the modifier for lathe. Lathe is L-A-T-H-E, and there it is. So now you can see here in the top view it's showing up. So let's rotate that. So I made my perspective view active. I'm going to go into angle snap. I'm going to grab this axis here along yellow and rotate that. And I want this rotated negative 180 degrees. There we go. So let's come over here at the little plus sign and maximize the viewport. Okay, so a couple things to talk about here. So right now it's very faceted. So because this is a high poly model, we don't want to see these hard edges. We want to come in here to segments and really crank those up to like, so I typed it up into 36. If I come in here and do edge faces, you can still kind of see those edges. I'm going to click and change my color to something a little darker so we can see. Let's actually put this at like 64. That's better. I'm going to kind of do it up to like 80. I don't want to see any of those hard edges. There we go. I think that's looking really good. Yeah, it's looking really nice. Alright, so let's take a look at our model. Right now there's a lot of crazy pinching happening in the middle. What happens if we click weld to core? Looks like that welds that core together and fixes our problem for us. So I'm going to restore the viewport. And if we look here in perspective, if we orbit around, you can see we have this very nice model now. Let's take a look. I'm going to come over here to utilities, and I want to find under more, I want Polygon Counter. So you can see that my selected object here is 26,960 triangles. That's a lot of polygons for something like a shield. And so what we want to do is we're going to take all this detail and turn that into a texture map. Alright, but first we got to get a little bit more detail done on this guy. Alright, so let's take this guy. One thing we want to do is shields aren't flat, right? So I'm going to come here to the top, and let's go in here under our editable spline. And I'm going to go down, I'm going to turn on show end results, and let's grab our vertex points. We're going to kind of want to move them to make that guy curve. So here, let's do this. Let's go over here and make a circle about the same size. After you make it, you just scale it to make sure it's about the same size. Make sure he's centered. I'm going to come in here to scale. Let's just scale this. Like, how curved do we want our shield? Maybe about this much. Make sure this is zeroed out. I think that looks good. Let's go with that. All right, so here in the top view, I'm going to go into vertex, and I'm going to region select my vertex points. I just want to pull this out so that those points are kind of based here out at the edge. And if it's too confusing, you could turn off show on results, and then you could just kind of move that stuff around. And this is going to give me a nice kind of curved edge for my shield. There we go. And then these guys, will kind of pull them out. So you may end up, because there's a lot of, you're dealing with Bezier handles. Let's grab these guys. So grab this handle and kind of pull them down so that the handle goes along that curve. I could do the same thing here if I region select these guys. Just kind of pull those down. You see how that kind of fixes that up? I'm just adjusting that curve. All right, I think that we're probably good. Let's click off of it. All right. Come over here. I'm either going maximize viewport or I'm using the shortcut Alt W. Control R to orbit, and now we can orbit around, see our shield. If we click on it, let's go to display and collapse all these until we find display properties. And we're going to turn on back face cull so that when we orbit around, we see there's the back side. All right, so here's our shield. It's looking really good. We could call this shield underscore HP. Let's get a couple more details on it, right? So I'm going to right click on it, say object properties. I'm going to change the visibility to 0.1 and say, okay, now it's transparent. We got to make sure we hit edged faces so we can still see it there. All right, so there's a couple different things we need. Let's get these discs as well as these little circles out there. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to come here to create, and I'm going to go to sphere, and I'm going to click, and I'm going to make a sphere about the same size as one of these guys. Now let's right click on him and clone him. It could be an instance, that's fine. Drag him over. Alright, that's probably pretty good. And then let's go ahead and we're going to make another rectangle here. About the size of this guy. Actually, no. I want to make a cylinder. Just click and drag. And then when I release, right now as I drag this back and forth, what I'm doing is I'm defining how high it is. So I'm just going to click anywhere and then right click to get out of cylinder. Let's go to modify as well as restore our viewport. Alright, so the shapes of those guys are about right. Let's go ahead and select this object and say object properties, visibility 1, so we can actually see it. There we go. We'll orbit around. Now, what we need to do is get them so that they're actually showing up. So Alt W, let's select our sphere and move him out. And so if we kind of look at him here, if I hit F4, we want him to just be, I'm going to orbit around, we want him to just kind of be poking out about on the outer side. We want kind of that half edge to kind of be poking out just slightly. So right about like that. And so let's grab this one on the end. I'm going to right click here in perspective and hit Z to zoom in on him. And I can move him out along Y as well. So kind of move him in. Alright, there he is. So he's kind of sitting there. That other one's sitting there. think we're in pretty good shape here. Now we just got to deal with the cylinder, which we'll orbit around. We'll just kind of move him out as well, so he's embedded in there. There we go. All right, so first off, change the number of height segments to 1, the number of cap segments to 2, and we're going to set the number of sides to 64. And then let's just grab the radius here and drag, oops, the height. I'm going to make him a little bit smaller. There we go. And if we look at him here, let's kind of orbit around perspective. I want to maximize this view. You see how he is in here at this angle, so we could maybe angle him slightly. If we turn off our angle snap, just grab yellow. We can angle him so he's kind of sitting a little bit more flat on there. Just kind of matches that angle. Go to Y and just kind of pull that up. All right, that's looking pretty good. Let's right click on this and convert to edit poly. I'm going to come in here now and click on this one vertex point in the center and then hold Control and click on Polygon. That selects all the polygons that made that up. And then just click Row. So I don't want to keep this guy flat. I want to come over here to Edit Polygons Outline. And I want to make the outline very subtle, -0.1 maybe. That's good. So it doesn't come straight up, it has a slight angle on it. So I'll click OK. And I'm going to go into Edge. Oops. I want to double click to get the entire loop going around the outer edge. I'm going to zoom in on him a little bit. I'm going to go into chamfer, and I want to set the chamfer very small to like 0.1. But I'm going to take this connecting edge detail and turn that up a little bit more. There we go. All right, so now things are looking up for us. We got our cylinder in place, we have our spheres in place. So let's Alt-W and make the front view active. I'm going to go ahead and select my shield here and save. Let's hide that. And now here in perspective, I'm going to come over to create sphere, and in perspective I want to make a sphere, keyboard entry, I'm going to make it a radius of 10 and hit create, and I'm going to right click on it and say convert to edit poly, and I'm going to find the rollout for edit geometry, and that has the attach button, and I'm going to take that attach, I'm going to click on the cylinder and the two spheres that are out there. And then I'm going to go in and I'm going to click on that cylinder and I'm going to click under Edit Geometry to attach. I'm going to say cylinder and say OK. I'm going to click on the sphere. I'm going to detach that and say OK. And then I'm going to select the sphere in the center and delete it. All right. So now, if I maximize my viewport, what I did was I made an object that had an orientation center of the world. I attached these objects to it, so their orientation, right, if I go to rotate and have my pivot on pivot point center, that pivot is right there in the center of the world. So I can take this here, this detail, and say tools, array, and then based off of the z-axis, which is the axis moving away from us, if I click preview, I can say I want 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So I'm going to change this value to 7, and then I can slowly increase that amount until it matches, right, whatever that might be. So maybe instead of 7, I'm going to set it to 8, so that I can kind of look. I just rolled the middle mouse wheel to zoom in. And I can look and see what value I need to have this at in order to get that cylinder to line right up. And it looks like maybe it's 51.5. 51.5 looks close enough. So now I'm just going to reduce that number back to 7. If you don't see, if I go back to 6, there's not 1. 7. There we go. All right, so now I have all those guys. Now I'm going to do a similar process with these circles. All right, So now I'm just going to click on this circle. I'm going to do Tools, Array, and now I'm actually going to click Reset All Parameters and click Preview again, and then just start increasing that value. So I kind of see the spacing similar to what I want. That probably looks good. And then let's zoom out. I'm going to click on this arrow and increase it until I have those spheres coming all the way around. And that's it, right? Make sure I don't have doubles. Just click OK. And then we have one more guy that we're going to do that with. Click on him, say Tools, Array. We'll change this again to Preview. So these guys, they're too far apart. So maybe you notice this time I didn't reset the parameters. So see how I bring it back, and that looks about good. The spacing there, I kind of like that. And so now I can increase that amount. Maybe I'll zoom out. There we go. Be careful when you're scrolling that. All right, I'm going to click OK. So now if I right click, say Unhide All, and if I hit F4 to show edge faces, now we have our shield. So what exists here, if I hit Alt W, this is going to be the shield that we're going to base our low poly is going to be based off of this guy. And if we look at our reference back there, that looks pretty good. They look very similar to each other. And this is what we're going to build. And we're going to make a low poly off of that. So I'm going to stop here. And I'm going to do a second part where we go through and we name these and then make a low poly.